Hello and welcome to MoreBikes. We're here in sunny Spain for the launch of this Moto Guzzi's reintroduced Stelvio adventure bike. So yeah, named after an iconic Italian pass and based largely on the V100 Mandello that's sort of been so popular for Moto Guzzi since its release a couple of years ago. This Stelvio's got quite a lot to live up to, so yeah, we've spent the day exploring in the hills above Almeria to see what it's made of. Let's get into it. So the good news is it looks great and sounds great, and that's a pretty good start, right? There's a sort of shade of Triumph Tiger to the front end, but the sharp angled tank and the big transverse V-twin lump sticking out the sides give it a look all of its own. It could only be a Guzzi. Racking up a few miles on the highway, on our way to the good stuff, the Stelvio proved itself incredibly comfortable. The shorter than most 830mm seat is pretty plush and perfectly sculpted, with enough slimming at the front to make it easy to flat foot for the shorter riders on the launch. Despite its bulk, it's actually surprisingly easy to move around too, partly because it carries the vast majority of its weight low down. Guzzi told us they've spent a lot of time perfecting the bike's aerodynamics and sort of claim it's the best in class. And the electronically adjustable screen is a nice touch, doing a good job of deflecting the wind to the top of my helmet at its highest setting. It's probably not perfect, but it works well enough, though I'd possibly question whether it's the best in the game. Yeah, so then it's sort of all about riding really. So as soon as we hit the twisties, the guide rider really opened things up. Quite the introduction to the bike, and although it proved very capable of hustling, it took me a little bit of time before I felt completely at home. The handling's good and it's been up to the task of being properly thrown around, but there is a slight sense of vagueness, particularly from the 19-inch front end. That's not unusual for adventure bikes, though it doesn't feel quite as settled in the turns as some of the competition. A light touch of back brake seems to tighten things up enough to help, so yeah, you can kind of ride around it. The brakes are decent too. They're proper Brembo monoblocks, and although there's not exactly superbike levels of bite, they help the Stelvio stop quickly and efficiently, with only a little dive from the front suspension when you really grab a handful. The suspension's probably the weakest link. It is well enough set up, but the Sachs USD forks up front are a little too soft, and the KYB suspension at the rear a little too firm. That said, there's still a decent balance of comfort and performance. As with any Guzzi, the engine's probably the highlight. It's characterful, flexible and fun. It's not really the fastest thing in the world, that's not what this bike's about, but the liquid-cooled 1042cc transverse V-twin kicks out a respectable 113 brake horsepower and 77 pounds-foot of torque. Nice low down whack of torque, and it pulls well up top too. The gearbox is probably a little agricultural, needing a firm hand, particularly between first and seconds, but the clutch is really light, and Guzzi's worked hard to make sure that you can shift without it, which is something that was a bit of a struggle on the Mandello that came previously. We did get a small chance to see what it was made of off-road. It is an adventure bike after all, but it sort of suggested that the Stelvio might not be most at home there. There are specific rider modes, and you can turn the ABS off entirely, but even then I suspect it'd struggle with anything much trickier than a fire trail. So one thing to mention is that the top spec £15,500 bike comes with a whole load of electronic rider aids. So there's a forward collision warning system which flashes and beeps at you when you get too close to someone in front, and there's a rear radar thing too which flashes a little warning on the dash and lights up a little spot on the indicator. You can sort of see the intention. That tech's being used for cars now, but on a motorcycle it feels largely redundant. I think Yamaha have got something similar with their front radar, which means that it will automatically brake for you if you're about to hit something. And I think the Guzzi probably, for that tech to be really worthwhile, this probably should have something like that too. There is a radar cruise control system, but unfortunately you've got to spend a little bit more cash from the aftermarket extras to make that happen. So if it was my money, I'd probably be more inclined to go for the £14,700 base model, and maybe spend the extra cash on some goodies instead, something like cruise control or the proper up and down quick shifter. There's obviously a lot of bikes which could be considered competition to the Guzzi. The closest probably the Honda Africa Twin Adventure Sports, I've just ridden one of those a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, smooth, characterful, similar sort of, it's got a 19-inch front, 17-inch rear. The sort of chassis setup's largely the same. It's got electric suspension, but then this has got the electric goodies. Power's quite similar. So yeah, I think although there is a whole host of different adventure bikes, you could look at the Suzuki V-Strom 1050 and yeah, maybe even the Ducati V2 Multistrada, but I think naturally the Africa Twin's probably the one that you would look at. So there we are, a great day kind of getting acquainted with the new Moto Guzzi Stelvio. There's lots to like about it, and yeah, I've been largely impressed, aside from a few sort of small niggles. But yeah, I suppose the big question is who's going to buy this bike? You buy a Moto Guzzi because you want a Moto Guzzi. This is something different in a very crowded and super competitive adventure motorcycle market. So this is sort of stands slightly apart, and I think it's kind of all the better for it. But yeah, I am just rambling at the end of a long day in the sunshine riding, and trying to keep up with some seriously fast guide riders. So if you want to know more and want to find out all the details, be sure to pick up the next issue of Motorcycle Sport and Leisure and a copy of MoreBikes too. Thanks a lot.